Boris Johnson's authority and even his position as Prime Minister has been called into question today as he introduced more crushing COVID measures despite allegations of an illicit government Christmas party last year. Key figures from the world of politics and beyond have united in piling on Boris. Among them, GBNews star Nigel Farage, who tweeted, "The PM has gone from denying a Christmas party in Number 10 to it may or may not have happened. Now we hear of new parties taking place in the Downing Street flat. Moral authority has completely evaporated. Why should any of us abide by the new restrictions?" Meanwhile, former leader of the Scottish Tories, Ruth Davidson, raged none of this is remotely defensible. Not having busy, boozy, not parties while others were sticking to the rules, unable to visit ill or dying loved ones, nor flat out denying things that are easily provable. Not taking the public for fools. However, Boris hit back prior to tonight's briefing in a fraught PMQs.
It is a great mistake to try to play politics with this issue. And I think that is what he is doing. I think that is what he is doing. And the public, Mr. Speaker, will not like to see, I don't think the public do want to see confidence in their measures, in these measures undermined. I think they can see the difference, Mr. Speaker. We are taking the steps necessary to protect the public, above all, Mr. Speaker, by rolling out the vaccinations, and rather than focusing on the events of a year ago.
Now, as I've said, introducing face mask extensions and a work-from-home order after everything that's come to light is the height of arrogance. But it's your view that I value most. So tell me, does the government have the authority to introduce Plan B measures? You can vote now in my poll and tweet me at GBNews. My email, dan@gbnews.uk. But first, I'm going to bring in Tory MP Sir Christopher Chope, who's accused his leader of resorting to scaremongering after a turbulent 24 hours. And he'll be debating Boris biographer Tom Bower, who says we need to wait for more evidence of an alleged party before we write off the PM. So, Sir Christopher Chope, I feel very annoyed about this press conference tonight. Why is Boris deciding to scaremonger at a time when it feels like his moral authority is slipping away?
Well, Dan, at the same time that he was holding the press conference, we in the House of Commons, with the help from the Speaker, had forced the Secretary of State to come along and make a statement to us. And although you haven't given that much coverage, the atmosphere in the House of Commons at 6 o'clock this evening was one where the government must be really worried, because there was only 1.5 people on the Conservative side supporting these measures. They were enthusiastically endorsed by the Labour Party without exception, but almost everybody who spoke from the Conservative benches expressed grave reservations about them. And a government that gets in a position where they have to rely upon opposition votes to get through controversial measures, which is what they're going to have to do next week, is under a lot of stress. And I hope that next week there will be a record rebellion by Conservative MPs against these proposals.
Well, I hope
and
so too.
That is becoming through.
You are our only hope. You know, the Tory backbench freedom fighters are our only hope, because the leader of no opposition, Keir Starmer, has made it clear he's going to nod all of this through. The Liberal Democrats have let their name down. They are pathetic. So you are our only hope. But I want to bring in Tom Bower, because, Tom, you think a lot of us are overreacting here, and actually this is certainly not the end of Boris Johnson.
Well, I think that he's clearly very wounded tonight and has been wounded for some weeks. I mean, he's played his cards appallingly, and to actually have even appointed Allegra Stratton was a catastrophic misjudgment, and her blubbering this afternoon, confirmed that. What a terrible spectacle. It's been a rotten day for Boris. The problem really is that across Europe, and in particular in SAGE and the scientists, they're urging him to go much, much further. And he is unfortunately undermined by his advisors. And he's weak at the moment. He can't resist what the advisors are saying and advising, except to water it down. So we are faced with an unfortunate situation of a damaged and wounded Prime Minister who I fear doesn't know how to rescue himself, although he could if he actually listened to some sound advice.
Well, he certainly needs some grown-ups in there, doesn't he? So, Christopher Shope, OK, there's fury on the backbenches over the introduction of Plan B, and I would say it's undemocratic that this is just introduced and you get to vote days later. That feels so wrong to me. But what about Boris's position as leader? Is it true that some people are whispering about a potential challenge, that some letters are potentially being sent?
Well, I don't think his leadership itself is under great threat at the moment. There have always been people who have their differences with him. And I think that, as has been said, we need to wait the outcome of this inquiry as to what exactly happened with the party. But I think there is enormous dissatisfaction on the Conservative benches that the man they thought was a freedom fighter seems to be quite the reverse. And even if he doesn't want to get down to the grips of this himself, why doesn't he insist on evidence-based policymaking? As the announcements in the House today from the Health Secretary were concentrating on speculation, may, could, possible, and so on. Those are not expressions that you use when you're imposing new restrictions upon people's liberty. And there is no evidence that the proposals put forward today are actually necessary or desirable. And we know that there are lots of adverse consequences which will flow from them. Boris has got to get a grip with the detail of this policy. And there's no better way of doing that than insisting that there should be a proper evidence-based policy before the cabinet is asked to take these decisions.
Well, the cabinet wasn't even asked, were they? Tom Bowell, what happened to Boris Johnson, the libertarian freedom fighter? Was that just some sort of construct rather than a reality?
No, I think it was there, and it has been eroded by several factors. First of all, I do think one's got to take into account his marriage. I mean, Carrie really is a rotten influence on him, and she's a political clot who causes terrible trouble. Whether it's about animals or about wilding in the countryside, or whether it's about the appointment of Allegra Stratton, which was her idea. I also think that he's let down terribly by the poor, appalling quality of the civil service. We saw that yesterday in the Foreign Affairs inquiry into Afghanistan. I mean, what a rabble all those civil servants were, lazy, incompetent,
useless.
Dereliction of duty. It was shocking. Yeah. And I think he's let down by the scientists. The problem with the scientists is they can't agree themselves, and he is too weak now to resist their alarmist warnings and say, as he did in the summer, we're opening up despite your warnings we shouldn't open up. And even his greatest critics, including Matthew Parry, said, if he gets away with this, I'll never criticize him about COVID in the future. And he got away with it. It was quite right. The problem is he is beleaguered. He looks exhausted. His hairstyle today in the Commons was outrageous. And he's a prime minister. He's a prime minister in need of some strong advisors and a new cabinet and new people in Downing Street. And I think that's the problem. Where will he look for them? How will he look for them?
Yeah, no, indeed, because let's be honest, it's Carrie who's choosing them at the moment. And as you say, she's making some terrible decisions. So, Christopher Shope, I just want to come back to this issue of moral authority. What are your constituents saying to you? Do they intend to follow these Plan B regulations? Because I have to be honest, everyone I'm talking to is saying no, 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 not again, especially if you come for our Christmas.
Well, I think there is a real danger that the rule of law is being brought into disrepute because we're asking the law to do things which the people are not going to be supporting, because they're not going to support it because there isn't the evidence as to why it's necessary. So this is quite a big challenge. And if there is effectively a civil disobedience, where does that leave those people doing the enforcement? And we already had some people intervening this evening in the Commons saying, well, why should we or our constituents follow these rules when they seem to be so arbitrary and are introduced by a government which seems not to want to follow its own rules itself. So there is a potentially very difficult situation here, and that's why I think the government has made an enormous mistake in trying to bring forward these new measures now, instead of waiting for more evidence, which it said it would be available next week. Why isn't it waiting for that evidence? And why doesn't it learn from the past? And Professor Ferguson was saying when we had the lockdown relaxed in July that there was going to be 100,000 or even 200,000 new cases a day as a consequence. Well, he was totally wrong. We had a maximum of about 30,000 cases, but we had similar scaremongering today from the health secretary saying that this is going to be, there are going to be millions of people who are going to be infected. We still
listen to them, even though time and again throughout this pandemic, Sage, Independent Sage, Ferguson, Whitty, they have all been wrong. I couldn't agree more, but it was a fascinating debate. Thank you for having it. That was Tory MP Sir Christopher Shope, and before that, the Boris biographer Tom Bauer. So who do you agree with? Tony writes on Twitter to say, who do they think they are helping? The people or the party? From here, I'd say neither. Glenn on email says, am I going to comply? Well, Boris, rearranged the words hell, cat, not, and chance to form a popular saying. I like that. As for mandatory vaccinations, good luck with that. Nobody has authority over my body. He can, as you put it, Dan, rack off. And Surrey, via Twitter, adds, yes, they do have the authority because we shouldn't let the transgressions of a few dictate what needs to be done to ensure public health. Well, the results are in. Only 14% of you agree that the government has the authority to introduce Plan B measures this week, while 86% of you say they don't. And as Sir Christopher Shope just spoke about, I wonder if that is going to lead to mass civil disobedience. And how does Boris deal with that? How does the police deal with that? We are in for a rocky few weeks, folks.